Hello, good morning, and welcome to Unacademy. Let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper. These are the topics that we shall be discussing today, and I would urge you to press the like button to encourage us and subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet. And before we start, two important announcements, as I announced yesterday as well. We at Unacademy are conducting India's biggest scholarship test, a championship test, on the 23rd of March. If you're attempting Prelims 2025, please attempt this test, not for these rewards, but for you to understand where do you stand in this competition. Because this exam is taken by almost 5 lakh aspirants. For example, just like last time, when even our app crashed, the website crashed because of the traffic. That is why we have 2 slots this time, 11 a.m. and 5 p.m. But if you're preparing for 2026 or beyond, you should attempt this test for these rewards. If not, for 100% scholarship to avail our subscription. And if you cannot get that scholarship, even then, it is becoming the most affordable learning program today, where our 15-month subscription is currently available at 22,999. There are other plans on display as well. Go through our website, check the offering, use this code IAS English, and you will automatically unlock the lowest price, the lowest subscription fee. Let's get started and let's look at topic number 1, a delimitation red flag, written by Professor Radha Kumar. She was previously the interlocutor of the Government of India in Jammu and Kashmir. Now, delimitation is a topic that we have discussed last week as well. But there are few aspects which we have not discussed, and we will discuss them today. What sort of question has been asked from this topic previously? For example, if you look at Prelims 2024, this question was asked: how many delimitation commissions have been constituted by the Government of India till December 2023? Can anybody tell me what is the right answer? The right answer is D4. Because Constitution says after every census there should be delimitation, which was conducted after the census of 51, then after the census of 61, then after the census of 71. So 3 times it was conducted. This is where the Government of India pushed for family planning programs. That don't worry about your share in Lok Sabha. Nothing is going to happen to that, because for the next 25 years, we are going to freeze it. Because Constitution was amended by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. The year was 1976. For 25 years, the delimitation exercise was frozen. Why? Because we wanted to urge and encourage the states to carry out family planning programs, to implement the family planning mechanism. Because after every census, when there was delimitation, it led to the increase in the number of seats to legislative assemblies as well, Lok Sabha as well. For example, from 500 to 525 to 545, the seats kept on getting increased. But to push for family planning programs, the Constitution was amended, and the Constitution said for the next 25 years, we will not carry out delimitation, which means if delimitation will be carried after the census of 2001. But in 2001, another Constitutional Amendment Act was passed to ensure that although we will carry out delimitation, but it will not lead to the increase in the number of seats, whether to legislative assemblies or to Lok Sabha. That means these seats will be frozen till we get the census figures after 2026. And ideally, when do we get the census numbers? Because census is carried out normally every 10 years. Barring 2021, when the census was delayed because of COVID-19 pandemic. So we thought that after 2021 census, there will be census in 2031. Which means if delimitation can happen only after the census figures after 2026 are obtained, which may have been obtained in 2031. So delimitation could have effectively been implemented after 2031, and we could have seen the first result of delimitation in 2034. Sir, what are you trying to say? I'm saying the term of the Lok Sabha currently is 2024 till 2029, if there is no premature dissolution of the Lok Sabha. From 2029, the term will be till 2034, if there is no premature dissolution of Lok Sabha, right or wrong? Constitution says after every census there should be delimitation, and whenever delimitation exercise is carried out, it will not affect the existing Lok Sabha. It can only come into force in the next Lok Sabha, which means if according to the Constitution, delimitation can be carried out only after the census figures after 2026 are obtained, which means ideally we should have census in 2031, which means then there will be delimitation, and this delimitation will not apply to this cycle, will apply after 2034. But because this 2021 census got delayed because of COVID-19 pandemic, it wasn't conducted in 2022, 23, 24, 25, and now there are talks that this census may be carried out in 2026. Which means if the census is carried out in 2026 and Constitution says the census figures after 2026 will be used for delimitation, that means this census will be used for delimitation. That means instead of 2034, this delimitation will enter into force from 2029 itself. That means in the next Lok Sabha itself. And this is where the southern states are fearing that we will lose our representation in the Lok Sabha, for which various recommendations have been prescribed. Recommendations such as freeze Lok Sabha seats forever, so that we can never have any increase in the number of seats in Lok Sabha. For example, when this delimitation was discussed in 2001 as well, prior to that as well, there were many members in the parliament who said, why should an increase in the population result in more increase in the number of seats in the Lok Sabha? So can we expect that there will be a time where we can have 1,000 members in the parliament? Will it be a parliament or a bazaar or a mela? That is why there is no need to increase the number of seats in Lok Sabha. Because if you look at it this way, for your local needs, daily problems that you are facing, for that, if you're living in rural areas, you have Panchayati Raj representatives to take care of your daily needs, daily problems. If you're living in urban areas, for that we have urban local bodies. The role of the MLA is to make laws for the entire state. And the role of an MP is to represent people at the national level, to make laws at the national level. For your local grievances, day-to-day problems, you have the third tier of government, which is Panchayat and urban local bodies. Yogendra Yadav, for example, the article that we discussed previously, Professor Yogendra Yadav says, freeze Lok Sabha seats forever, but then increase the number of seats in the Legislative Assembly, because no state will object to it. If there is an increase in the number of seats to Tamil Nadu Legislative Assembly, why would Gujarat object or Bihar object, and vice versa? But Professor Radha Kumar talks about another important suggestion, and this is something which can become very important, and you can write in your mains answers if such a question is asked. What about Rajya Sabha? We are focused on Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies because after delimitation, there may be an increase in the number of seats to Lok Sabha and the legislative assemblies. What about Rajya Sabha, which is the federal chamber of Indian Parliament, which represents the interests of the states in the parliament? If you look at United States of America, they have the upper house called Senate. Regardless of the population of a state, every state can have 2 MPs, 2 senators in the Senate, 2 representatives in the Senate. But in India also, we have Rajya Sabha and the seats are allocated based on the population. That is why a state such as UP has 31 MPs in the Rajya Sabha. The state such as Sikkim has only 1. The state such as Tamil Nadu has 19. Because population plays a very important role. Population is the criteria. But Professor Radha Kumar says, what about Rajya Sabha? We should allot seats to Rajya Sabha equally to zones. And which are these zones? Northern, Central, Eastern, Western, and Southern states. Because in 1956, when the States Reorganization Act was enacted, the entire country was reorganized into 14 states and 6 union territories. The then Prime Minister Pandit Nehru said, why don't we organize these states into zones as well? Because the problems of the northern states may not be the same as the problems of the southern states and vice versa. So let's create zones, and that's how under States Reorganization Act, zonal councils were created. Zonal councils in the northern, southern, eastern and western India as well as central India. And then in 1971, another zonal council was created called Northeastern Council Act. According to Professor Radha Kumar, although she does not talk about Northeastern Council, she says that in Rajya Sabha, we should assign seats equally to all the zones. So that as a zone you are represented in the Rajya Sabha, not as a state. And today, she says these zonal councils should be taken out of the grip of the Home Minister. Because right now, if we have these zonal councils, the Union Home Minister is the chairman of these zonal councils, except Northeastern Council, where the chairman is nominated by the President. In these 5 zonal councils, the chairman is the Home Minister. But who decides the agenda of zonal councils? Who conducts and organizes the meetings of the zonal council? It is the center. It is the Home Minister. Professor Radha Kumar says, these zonal councils, most of them, they have not met since 2023. Although there was a meeting of the Western Zonal Council, but there hasn't been any meeting of these zonal councils since 2023. There hasn't been a meeting of the Southern Zonal Council, which was planned in Chennai in 2022. Even that has not taken place. So we should liberate these zonal councils from the grip of the Home Ministry. Then how will these zones interact with the Union Executive, interact with the Union Government? Professor Radha Kumar says, we should get them interacted with through interstate council. Now you tell me, is this interstate council a constitutional body or an extra constitutional body or a statutory body? What sort of body it is? Article 263 of the Constitution says, Dear President, if you are satisfied that it would be in public interest that you establish an interstate council where states, center can come together and discuss their problems, resolve their grievances, you can establish an interstate council. So it is a non-permanent body. It is not a permanent constitutional body. Sarkaria Commission was set up for center-state relations. These facts are very important. If these organizations are in the news, you can expect a question in the upcoming prelims examination from these organizations, including these facts. Sarkaria Commission, which was set up in 1983 for center-state relations, it had recommended that you should set up a permanent interstate council. And that's how this interstate council was set up in the year 1990. But this interstate council, as if it is defunct, it is not meeting. The last meeting of this interstate council took place in 2016. So you might expect a question on interstate council. Who is part of the interstate council? Although President has set up this interstate council, established it in 1990, but it is not a permanent constitutional body. It is headed by the Prime Minister, and this detail, which is there on your screen, is of 2024, which means the latest details that we have available for interstate council. Because if you check the website of interstate council, you will get a sense that interstate council consists of Prime Minister as the chairman, chief ministers of all the states, administrators of union territories which do not have a legislative assembly, and then 6 cabinet ministers nominated by the Prime Minister. But if you look at the existing composition of interstate council, it's slightly different. Different in the sense, we have the Prime Minister as the chairman, we have chief ministers of all states, we have chief ministers of union territories which have a legislative assembly, and administrators of those union territories which do not have a legislative assembly. It also talks about that if there is a state which is under president's rule, where the legislature is kept under suspended animation, where the chief minister and council of ministers have been dismissed, the governor of that state shall be invited to attend the meetings of the council. This fact becomes important for your prelims examination. And instead of 6, this time Prime Minister has nominated 9 cabinet ministers to the interstate council. So the composition of interstate council can also become important for your examination. So what is the recommendation of Professor Radha Kumar? That although yes, there should be a freeze on the Lok Sabha seats forever, and there is no harm if the seats in the legislative assemblies are increased after delimitation exercise. But what about Rajya Sabha? We should assign seats in Rajya Sabha to 5 zones equally, so that as a zone, we are getting represented in the Rajya Sabha. And then these zonal councils should be taken out of the grip of the Home Ministry. And these zonal councils should interact with the union government through interstate council. But then Professor Radha Kumar talks about lessons of delimitation from Jammu and Kashmir and Assam. Why Jammu and Kashmir and Assam? Because in Jammu and Kashmir recently, 2 years ago, delimitation was carried out by Delimitation Commission. And in Assam, delimitation was carried out by the Election Commission of India. Now, should delimitation be necessarily carried out by the Delimitation Commission or by Election Commission of India or by any authority? Constitution says this delimitation can be carried out by any authority as decided by the central government, as decided by the parliament. So normally it is the Delimitation Commission. But in case of Assam, it was carried out by Election Commission of India. In Jammu and Kashmir, 2011 census was the basis for delimitation. In Assam, it was the 2001 census. In J&K, it led to the increase in the number of seats. In Assam, there is no increase. And now the courts, the Supreme Court has given time to the central government that you should carry out delimitation also in Arunachal Pradesh, in Manipur, in Nagaland as well. If there is and has been no delimitation after 2008, because when the delimitation was carried out in 2002, after the census of 2001, the final award was given in the year 2008. So since 2008, we haven't had a delimitation anywhere in this country, because we can't have delimitation till the census figures after 2026 are known. So why was there delimitation in Jammu and Kashmir? Why was there delimitation in Assam? And why is the court asking for delimitation in Arunachal, Manipur and Nagaland? And further, Article 329 of the Constitution says there is a bar on the interference by courts in electoral matters, such as delimitation. That means the award given by the Delimitation Commission cannot be challenged in any court of law. Then why was delimitation exercise in Jammu and Kashmir challenged before the Supreme Court? These are the questions that should be on your mind if these questions are not yet on your mind. Because when the delimitation was carried out in Jammu and Kashmir, it led to the increase in the number of seats, and 7 seats were increased. 6 seats were increased in Jammu, 1 seat was increased in the valley, in the valley of Kashmir. Professor Radha Kumar says, it is her allegation, not mine, that it was done on communal lines. That 6 seats were given to Hindu majority Jammu and only 1 seat was given to the Muslim majority valley, despite the fact that population of valley is more than that of Jammu. But Professor Radha Kumar may also be wrong, because population is not the only criteria for carrying out delimitation. Connectivity is also an issue. If there are remote areas which lack connectivity with other parts, that can also be a factor for granting constituencies. Also, the boundaries of administrative units. Which means the boundaries of the districts. It is also a factor. But there are some allegations made by Radha Kumar in this article. We will not discuss them, we will ignore them, but we will just understand one thing, that she is alleging that seats have been assigned to different regions based on communal lines, and this has been the practice in many countries of the world called gerrymandering, where the electoral boundaries are changed in such a manner that it suits the ruling political party. And she says that this has happened in Jammu and Kashmir, this has happened in Assam. How it happened in Assam? New districts were created. But then just before delimitation, those new districts were merged back with their existing parent districts, so that boundaries of administrative units cannot become the ground for delimitation. And according to Radha Kumar, the Muslim majority areas were converted into minority areas, or Hindu majority areas were given constituencies. She also alleges that there are some constituencies, for example, where Hindu population is large and the constituency size is only 50,000. Whereas there are other constituencies where Muslims are in the majority, where the voters' population is more than 1.5 lakh as well. That is one constituency. So she alleges that although political parties are only talking about losing share in Lok Sabha by the southern states, nobody is raising another red flag, which is that even if the constituencies are demarcated, it may also be demarcated on communal lines. And that is also another danger to pluralistic federalism. But why was delimitation order challenged? Why was the delimitation exercise for J&K challenged, and why delimitation in J&K and 4 northeastern states? The delimitation order was not challenged in the court. So nobody challenged in the court why 6 seats for Jammu and 1 seat for the valley, because you can't challenge the award of the Delimitation Commission before the court of law. But what was challenged was the very exercise of delimitation. In a sense, when in the rest of the country, delimitation is stopped till 2026, why carry out delimitation for Jammu and Kashmir? When for the rest of the country, delimitation can be carried out only after the census of 2026. Why 2011 census is made the basis of delimitation? Supreme Court rejected this petition. Supreme Court said, now that Jammu and Kashmir is not a state, it is a union territory. So that limitation, that there can't be delimitation, there can't be increase in the number of seats, that applies only to states, not to UTs. Since J&K is a UT, delimitation is valid. But why delimitation in Assam and 3 other northeastern states? Because the last time when delimitation was carried out in 2002, the final award was given in 2008. This is where these northeastern states, they protested. They said, don't make 2001 census as the basis for delimitation because there is an illegal migration into India, illegal migration into these states. That is why don't carry out delimitation. And this is where the President of India froze the delimitation exercise in these 4 states on the advice of the Prime Minister. And then said, once delimitation is carried out, it will be carried out by Election Commission of India, not by the Delimitation Commission. Which means in these 4 northeastern states, security issues were the reasons for not carrying out delimitation in 2002. Since it was pending, that is why it was carried out in Assam and will now be carried out in 3 other northeastern states as well. And for this delimitation, let's look at the question. Discuss the significance of the delimitation exercise in ensuring equitable representation in the Indian parliamentary system. Critically analyze the concerns raised by the South Indian states regarding the proposed delimitation after 2026. Okay. Then let's look at another topic. The Vice President of India has now called for a debate on freebies. Now, what is freebie? And what is welfare? This is where the lines become blurry and you will not be in a position to understand what is freebie and what is a welfare. For example, political parties in Tamil Nadu, whether DMK or AIADMK or any other political party, these are the 2 major political parties. They have been long promising voters. What? Buffaloes will be given if you vote for us. Juicer, mixer, grinder will be given if you vote for us. Color television sets will be given if you vote for us. Gold rings will be provided if you vote for us. Juicer, mixer, grinder will be provided if you vote for us. Ultimately, this matter went to the court. Subramaniam Balaji, 2013. Supreme Court was told, dear Supreme Court, this amounts to bribe, which is a corrupt practice under the Representation of the People Act 1951. Which means there is a law called Representation of the People Act 1951, which governs the entire conduct of elections in India. Can you bribe voters to vote for you? You can't, because that's a corrupt practice. And any candidate who bribes the voters may be disqualified as well. But what about political parties promising buffaloes, juicer, mixer, grinder, color television sets to people? This amounts to bribe. It's a corrupt practice under Representation of the People Act 1951. Supreme Court said 2 contradictory things. Supreme Court said freebies, they shake the root and cause of free and fair elections. But at the same time, it is not a bribe, it is not a corrupt practice. These are 2 contradictory things. If it is not a bribe, why is it shaking the root and cause of free and fair elections? But Supreme Court asked the Election Commission of India, can you interfere in this matter? Election Commission of India said, normally we can't. Why? Because we can interfere if it comes under Model Code of Conduct. But Model Code of Conduct starts as soon as the election dates are announced by the Election Commission of India and remains in force till the declaration of results. Normally, these political parties, they announce their election manifesto before the dates are announced by the Election Commission, so that the election manifesto does not come under Model Code of Conduct. So we can't. But what we can do is, we can sit with political parties and arrive at a consensus that your election manifesto should be related to directive principles of the state policy, should be in conformity with the constitution. Political party said, very good. If our election manifesto has to be closely mirrored along the lines of the directive principles of the state policy, DPSPs are there in our constitution to ensure a welfare state. And for that, if welfare programs we are going to announce and promise in our election manifesto, we are following the DPSPs. In another directive, Election Commission of India, as well as the Supreme Court said, if you are promising something, dear political parties, if you are promising something, for example, you are promising sun, stars, and the moon, please tell us what is your financial plan to fund these promises. You can't make promises out of the thin air by promising sun, stars, and the moon. You have to tell us what is the financial plan through which you are going to fund these election promises. Even then, political parties, they have not abided by this. They keep on promising. And this we have seen in various state governments. For example, in Delhi recently, where there was a competitive populism, where all the three major political parties, two major, one minor political party, they were competing with each other in terms of various SOPs announced for the voters. One party said, we will give you 2,000 rupees every month for every woman. Another political party said, so what, we will give you 2,500. And then it keeps on getting piled up, because once you announce a particular scheme, you can only add on to it. You can't revoke it, because the other political party which is in opposition, it will only try to better this offer. Otherwise, people will not give you the chance to govern. For example, the Mahayuti in Maharashtra, it was able to win the election, and many activists, many writers are saying that it is because of Mukhyamantri Maji Ladki Bahin Yojana, the cash scheme for women. Similarly, it was on the lines of the Ladli Behna scheme launched by Shivraj Singh Chauhan when he was the Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh, which led to the BJP sweeping the elections in Madhya Pradesh. So there are freebies and there is welfare, and the lines are blurry between the two. We don't know what is freebie, we don't know what is welfare. For example, giving cash for women can be freebie as well as a welfare. How do you decide it? Now, one way of deciding it is, if this is intended for a beneficiary, genuine beneficiary, then it is a welfare, it is not freebie. For example, women and their contribution to household work is still not contributed in GDP. What is GDP? The monetary value of goods and services produced in an economy. Women are also giving services every single day in their household, but that is not contributed in the form of the GDP. So what is their contribution to GDP? That is not recognized. When Tamil Nadu political parties were asked, why are you providing color television sets to the people? What is the rationale? Political party said, we want to give it to the women because they take care of the household work during the morning. And then after that, once they are done with this household work, they want to relax as well. They want a sense of entertainment as well. That is why we are giving them color television sets. So it's not a freebie, it's welfare for them. And it is through these color television sets that they will watch politicians make promises and they will hold them accountable. It is through this color television set that current affairs programs will be displayed and shown to these women so that they become politically aware as well. So don't call it freebie, it is welfare. So how do you draw the line between freebie and welfare? That becomes difficult. But if it is for a genuine beneficiary, then it is welfare. Otherwise, it is freebie. For example, recently there were newspaper reports which said that the owners of the four-wheelers, cars, women, they are also getting the benefit of the Mukhyamantri Maji Ladki Bahin Yojana in Maharashtra, which means even those who are not genuine, even those who are not required, even those who are not needy, even they are getting benefit, then this amounts to leakage. And this is a freebie, this is not a welfare. This may amount to bribe. But there are also who say, this is the only time, and look at this carefully, this is the only time when political parties and their leaders, they think about the poor people. Otherwise, they are neglected. They are taken out of the visibility for 4.5 years. Because election to election, this is how the poor become visible in this country. And during this period, if some cash is given to the voters, if some schemes are given to the voters, they will take it. But what stops this voter from accepting this cash, but then at the same time applying his independent mind to decide who to vote for, and not necessarily vote for the person who has given you this cash, not necessarily vote for that political party which has promised you that money. You should apply your independent mind. But whether electricity up to 200 units or 300 units should be made free, whether water up to 7,000 liters should be made free or not, whether bus rides should be made free or not, this is something that we have to decide whether it is part of freebie culture or it is part of welfare. Bus rides, if they are free, it will help a worker, particularly a migrant worker and a laborer. And if the bus ride is free, it will also make the cost of labor cheap. Because if I am a laborer, I have to go out and work. Initially, I would include my transportation cost and I will charge 500 rupees per day. Now, if I am not able to spend 100 rupees for my transportation, I will say, okay, I don't need 500, give me 400, which means the cost of labor will become cheap, which means ultimately it will help the economy. So there are economic angles, there are social angles. For example, maternity relief. We have a Maternity Benefit Act, which talks about that paid maternity leave of 26 weeks will be paid to women for 2 children. But majority of the women are working in the unorganized sector. And for them, if cash is given at the most critical juncture of her life during maternity, it can't be treated as a freebie. It has to be welfare. But there is one professor, Ms. Ritika Khera. She says, instead of cash, I don't have a problem with cash, but why is it that consistently we are resorting to these cash transfers, and at the same time, the allocation to Manrega has lowered? Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. She cites the example of Tamil Nadu, where a woman gets 12,000 rupees per year as part of cash transfer. But if she would have got work under MG Narega, she would have got 29,000 rupees per year. But since the allocation for MG Narega has reduced, these cash transfers are nothing. Money is being lost by these women because they have been crying at the top of their throats, voices that we need employment, we need work rather than cash. Instead, we should increase the allocation for schemes such as MG Narega. And at the same time, something else. 2 important things before we wrap up the discussion on this. We need CAG's involvement. Involvement in the sense, CAG can conduct a legal audit or it can conduct a performance audit. And who can decide what is the kind of audit that I will perform? CAG. CAG has the power to decide it. Legal audit is money has been withdrawn from Consolidated Fund of India. Have you spent it or not? Legally or not? For that, give us the receipt. If the receipts are matching, audit complete. That's a legal audit. It's like you have been given 10,000 rupees by your father that you spend this every month. And after that, I will seek a report. You say, Dad, I've spent 10,000 rupees. Where? I'll show you all the bills. This is the bill I gave. This is the amount I paid to a restaurant, to a bookseller, to somebody for this purpose, for Netflix. And this matches 10,000. So I have not misspent it. But performance audit is something different. You evaluate the outcome of that spending. For example, if it is legal audit, and the parliament has assigned you 1,000 crores to spend on, let's say, travel. This is a legal audit. If you can show the receipt that you have traveled, audit is complete. But performance audit means what exactly did you achieve by traveling? This is where we need CAG's involvement. All these schemes, all these policies and the programs implemented by the government, whether you call it freebies or welfare, should be audited, and performance audit should be done by CAG so that we can understand, public can understand what did we achieve through these schemes. And there has to be a political consensus. It is high time that we reach a political consensus, because without political consensus, it is like a race to the bottom. Because one political party will promise 2,500 rupees, the other political party will promise 5,000 rupees. What will happen to our exchequer? What will happen to the amount of money that we have? It will keep on getting crushed. And there are already states in India which are almost under debt. Not almost under, they are under debt, and they are almost at the verge of collapse. I won't take the names of those states, but you know which are these states, which because of the freebie culture, because of the mismanagement, because of the fiscal mismanagement, they are almost at the verge of financial collapse. So if we don't want the nation to collapse, there has to be a political consensus so that political parties agree that these are the areas where we can promise, and these are the areas where we should not be announcing, which means we have to define what constitutes freebie and what constitutes welfare, because there is a line which blurs between the two. And that is why this question has been picked up for your mains practice. Discuss the impact of election freebies on India's fiscal health and democratic processes. How do they differ from genuine welfare measures? And what steps can be taken to strike a balance between populism and sustainable development? Okay, great. Let's look at another topic. Torture shadows India's justice system. There are individuals who borrow loans, and when the time comes to repay these loans, they disappear from the country, they leave. And they settle in the tax havens, or they are in Dubai or London. What is the only way to bring them back to India for justice? Extradition. Whether it comes to Lalit Modi, Mehul Choksey, or anybody else, extradition is the only route. Second, there are terrorists who scheme terror activities in India, plan them, but they are currently in US or in Canada or in New Zealand or in other countries. We want to bring them back to India for justice. What is the only way? Extradition. One businessman who was called for extradition into India, who was wanted in India, who is wanted in India, Sanjay Bandari. He was to be extradited to India, but he approached the court in London and said, don't extradite me to India. Why? Because in India, I will be tortured. Because there is a convention which was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly on the 10th of December 1984, called Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman or Degrading Treatment or Punishment. This is the convention that India has not ratified. And when India has not ratified this convention, it primarily means that there will be a custodial torture of me. And what London court did, London court stopped the extradition of Mr. Bhandari to India on the grounds that there is an apprehension that he will be tortured in India because India has not ratified United Nations Convention Against Torture. And this judgment has been made the basis by Tahawur Rana, who is accused in India for masterminding and plotting 26/11 Mumbai attacks, whose extradition was cleared by United States to India. He is also making the same ground in his petition before the US court. Don't extradite me to India because in India they have not ratified United Nations Convention Against Torture. I will be mistreated. I will be custodially tortured. Don't send me. And because of not ratifying this convention, these are the ill effects of it. And this is the issue raised by former Law Minister Mr. Ashwini Kumar. Even with countries, for example, we extradited Abu Salim from Portugal. And there was a deal that we conducted with Portugal saying we will not give him death sentence because there are some countries, more than 120 countries of the world, they have abolished capital punishment, death sentence. So whenever these countries negotiate with India, if a most wanted man is to be extradited to India, they put a condition that you can't give him death sentence, and we agree. So it is high time that India ratifies this convention of United Nations Convention Against Torture. In fact, there was a bill which was introduced in the parliament in 2010, but it lapsed upon the dissolution of the Lok Sabha. Despite prodding by the Law Commission as well, we still have not enacted a law against torture, which means we have not enacted any such law. We have not even ratified this convention. Mr. Ashwini Kumar says, there is a judiciary role and there is a abdication by the judiciary as well. For example, Vishakha 1997 guidelines. You might have heard about this case. Bamri Devi, she was working with the Rajasthan government. Her primary role was you have to persuade people to stop child marriages. And she was campaigning against child marriages. She wanted to stop the child marriage of a 9-month-old girl child. And because of which she was gang raped. But then the court acquitted all the 5 people who were accused of this gang rape. Curiously, the court said that 2 of the accused, one is the uncle, the other is the nephew. These are the 2 people who are accused of raping Bamri Devi. And we don't understand that these 2 people can rape Bamri Devi. Why? Because one is the uncle, the other is the nephew. Our Indian culture does not allow and does not envisage. We cannot even assume that uncle would be raping somebody in presence of the nephew, or the nephew would be raping somebody in presence of the uncle. The court further pointed out that what about the husband of Bamri Devi? Why was he sitting? And why did he not use his force to stop this rape? Which means rape never happened in the first place. Why am I telling this story? Because then a non-governmental organization approached the Supreme Court called Vishakha and asked the Supreme Court, what about prevention of sexual harassment of women at workplaces? Because Bamri Devi was at a workplace. Supreme Court said, don't worry. Even if there is no law, we will issue a guidelines. Why? Because India is a signatory to Convention Against Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. Since India is a signatory to this international convention, basis that we will implement Vishaka rules. So if India would have signed this convention, even if there was no law passed by the parliament, the courts in India would still have issued guidelines to prevent custodial torture. We have International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. We have ratified United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. And basis this, the court has said in 2013, in the Nalsar judgment, Supreme Court said transgender is a third gender because we can't be discriminating on sexual orientation. But Ashwini Kumar also says that there has been a judicial abdication. Why can't the Supreme Court prod the central government that you should make anti-custodial torture rules? But you will say that since we have not ratified this convention, how can Supreme Court issue guidelines or rules or prod the government that you have to make this law or you have to make these rules? Supreme Court can do that. Why? Because what is happening right now because of Ranveer Allahabadiya case? The simple case before the court was Ranveer Allahabadiya approaches the Supreme Court and says, "My lord, there are FIRs against me in Assam, Mumbai and various other places. For God's sake, please club these FIRs at one place so that I don't have to move from one jurisdiction to another to justify myself, to prove my innocence." Instead of allowing this prayer, the Supreme Court is asking the Attorney General, "Come here. Can you please make rules so that we can control digital media?" Similarly, in Tehseen Poonawala, Supreme Court asked the central government that you make rules against mob lynching. So when Supreme Court in Tehseen Poonawala case can say that you have to make rules for mob lynching, can in Ranveer Allahabadiya case say that we need some mechanism to control the social media or this digital media? Why can't Supreme Court issue a guideline, issue a rule or force the central government to bring in anti-torture law? But sir, regulations are different, laws are different. If laws are different, regulations are different, what did Supreme Court do in the Shayara Bano case? When the instant triple talaq case was being heard by the Supreme Court, the 5-judge bench of the Supreme Court asked the parliament that if you want, you can frame a law. So Supreme Court has that power, but in case of custodial torture, Supreme Court is abdicating from its responsibility. But then there is another angle. Former bureaucrats, activists, writers, they approached the Supreme Court in 2024, Ashok Kumar Sharma and others versus Union of India. "My lord, please issue a guideline." But what is the guideline? "My lord, there are public companies, there are private companies as well. Okay? They are supplying arms to Israel. So, Israel is accused of genocide. And it is not only accusation, it has been upheld by International Court of Justice at Hague in Netherlands. Because when on October 7, the terrorists from Gaza, Hamas, crossed the Gaza-Israel border, killed Israelis, took Israeli citizens hostages, including women and children as well. And some of these are still hostages. A full-blown war broke out between Israel and Hamas. And then the annihilation of the Gaza population took place, where in Israel was accused of genocide. And what is this genocide? If you do something to wipe out an entire population or a significant part of that population because of their religion, because of their race, because of their ethnicity, if you are preventing births, that is also genocide. And the argument was that since Israel is bombing the hospitals of Gaza, you are preventing births, and this is genocide. And this is where various states, for example, South Africa, approached International Court of Justice on the grounds that Israel should be punished for genocide. And International Court of Justice said, yes, all states are under obligation not to render any aid or assistance to Israel because it is guilty of genocide. That is why Ashok Kumar Sharma and others approached the Supreme Court and said, dear Supreme Court, can you issue guideline to the central government that you should not give licenses, you should suspend licenses, or you should withhold licenses to these private and public companies who are selling arms, giving arms and ammunition to Israel. Supreme Court said, on what basis? My lord, we are a signatory, we have ratified international conventions. For example, Genocide Convention. For example, Geneva Convention. India is a ratifier of these conventions, and as such, you have a role. So you have to direct the central government that you withhold licenses or cancel licenses of those private and public companies who are selling arms and ammunition and weaponry to Israel. The petitioner said, and it is not only about in India. Germany was also told by International Court of Justice because Nicaragua approached the International Court of Justice and said Germany should not supply war weapons and ammunition to Israel. ICJ said, yes, all those who are party to international conventions, for example, Genocide Convention, Geneva Convention, you have a moral responsibility. You have a legal responsibility that you should not supply war weapons which will be used to further perpetrate genocide. And that is why Dutch government was asked that you should not sell F-35 spare parts to Israel because these can be used to further bomb Gaza. And same judgment was the basis where United Kingdom and various other countries, they decided that we will not supply any arms or ammunition to Israel. And basis this, we are approaching you because you have that power. You are the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said, no, we are going to reject this petition. Why? Because number one, it concerns Israel, which is not a party to this case. Israel is not a party to this case. So how can we interfere? After all, it's a matter related to the sovereign country. Second, if the central government cancels or withholds the license, export license to various companies, and thereby they will stop selling arms and ammunition to Israel, it may amount to breach of contract. And when there is a breach of contract, Israel may force these companies to pay hefty amount. And three, this is a policy decision, that too in the domain of external affairs, foreign policy, and this is where we may not interfere. Various activists, they say that this amounts to judicial evasion as well, abdication as well. Why? Because even if it is related to Israel, but we are not asking Supreme Court to issue directive to Israel. We are asking Supreme Court to issue directive to the Union of India. That means action had to be taken not by Israel, but by the Union of India, that you withhold or cancel the arms export licenses to these companies who are selling to Israel. So where is Israel involved in this? Why Israel should have been a party to this? Second, you are saying breach of contract. So what? Even if there was a breach of contract, these companies could have claimed force majeure. which is a valid excuse or valid defense in these contract cases. And what is this force majeure? Basically an event which forces you that you are not able to abide by the contract. And what is that issue which forces you not to abide by this contract? We wanted to sell you arms, but then ICJ has said that you are using these arms for genocide. This has forced us to withdraw from this contract. And Israel could not have pushed for damages because you can always claim force majeure. And third, if it is a policy decision, but isn't judicial review part of what you have said is the basic structure? But be that as it may, what this article talks about is that one businessman who is wanted in India, who was to be extradited to India, he has got now the permission of the court in London that you should not be extradited. Why? Because India has not ratified UN Convention Against Torture, which means there will be custodial torture of this individual, which we are not going to be party to. That is why no extradition. And this has been made basis by Tahawur Rana in United States. Now, in this backdrop, what is the role of the judiciary? The role of the judiciary can be, if India has ratified a convention, even if there is no law, the court can issue guidelines, and these guidelines will have the force of the law. Because whatever judgment is given by the court under Article 141, it becomes the law of the land. Second, Ashwini Kumar, former union minister, says the court should have prodded the government that you should come up with this policy, you should come up with an anti-torture law. And if the court can force the government to come up with policies related to social digital media, for example, in Ranveer Allabadia case, or in mob lynching case, Tehseen Poonawalla case, or in Shaira Banu case, you can very well do in torture related cases as well. That's what you need to know from this article. Now let's look at another column. Telecom tribunal reforms to handle data protection pleas. Do we have a right to privacy? Yes. It is a fundamental right under Article 21 of the Constitution. But if it is indeed a fundamental right, shouldn't there be a law to protect my privacy? For example, download the app. You may not have thoughtfully thought about it, but there are so many permissions that this app is asking from you. Allow this app to access your contacts. Allow this app to access your phone book or your photos. Allow this app to make and receive calls, to send and receive SMS, read SMS as well. There are so many permissions that you are giving. And what these companies do to this data, we never know. Then what will happen to our privacy? The problem is, and look at the irony, when government is asking for data, we hesitate. No, don't make Aadhaar mandatory. Make Aadhaar compulsory. We don't want to give you biometric. No, nothing. But we share biometric, fingerprint, any form of data with Meta, with Alphabet, with Apple so many times in a single day, and then we don't bat an eye. Shouldn't there be a law to protect our privacy, to safeguard and guard our privacy, our data? Because as they say, data is the new oil. It was oil which was the basis of conflicts in the Middle East and the world. Now it will be on the basis of data. Everybody is hungry about your data. For that, there was a panel set up by the government, headed by former judge, Justice B.N. Sri Krishna. And basis that, a law was passed by the parliament called Digital Personal Data Protection Act 2023. But you know that unless and until there are rules made under this act is meaningless, because you need rules to implement this law. And now we have draft rules available in public. And according to these draft rules, there are some issues according to Ms. Natasha Agarwal. What are these draft rules and what are these issues? Issue number 1 is Data Protection Board. Under this Digital Personal Data Protection Act, Data Protection Board as a statutory body has been constituted and it has a lot of power. For example, how my data is stored, processed, authenticated, or shared, or there is a data leakage. This Digital Protection Board, it has a power, it has a quasi-judicial power as well. It can impose punishment as well. But according to the rules, who will be appointed to this Data Protection Board will be at the discretion of the union government. That means union government will have the ultimate power. When union government has the ultimate power, what if union government is responsible for the breach of your data? It is the union government which is responsible for the data leakage, or maybe not deliberately, but their data storage facilities are so poor that there is a leakage. Aadhaar database got leaked. Then there should be a punishment for the central government. Who will impose this punishment? Digital Protection Board. How will it act against the government when the government nominates you and appoints you? That is problem number 1. Problem number 2, for example, when Justice B.N. Krishna gave the report, he had recommended that there should be a separate tribunal. Because what is the impact of a tribunal? In tribunal, we have judicial members. In tribunal, we have experts as well. For example, tomorrow when you become an IAS officer, IPS officer, any problem related to your working conditions, service conditions, you will have to approach the CAT, Central Administrative Tribunal. It will have judicial members, it will have experts as well. Decision will be taken quickly. Decision will be taken better. Why? Because now you have expertise of the experts, you have the knowledge of the laws by the judges as well. You have the knowledge of the service rules by the experts as well. And that is how decisions of the tribunal are much better, quick. And obviously, they reduce the burden on the high courts because high courts are overburdened with the pendency of the cases. Sri Krishna Committee had recommended that there should be a separate tribunal. That means if you are not satisfied with the decision of the Digital Protection Board, you approach a separate tribunal. Right? Then, when a draft law was passed, it was said that the decision of the Digital Protection Board can be filed before the High Court of that state. But as we know, High Courts are overburdened, so it would not have made any sense. Now, these rules say the appellate authority will be Telecom Dispute Settlement and Appellate Tribunal, TDSAT. And what is the problem because of TDSAT? According to Section 14C of Telecom Regulatory Authority Act of 1997, member of TDSAT should have been secretary to the Government of India for at least 2 years. If not, listen to me carefully. You should have expertise in technology, telecommunications, industry, commerce, or administration. The structure of TDSAT currently is that it can hear complaints related to telecommunication law, related to telecom. But data privacy is a different ball game altogether. How your data was processed, authenticated, leaked, so on and so forth. You need an expert in data protection. You don't need an expert in telecommunications. So we need to amend the law as well, to provide that there should be a technical expert who has an expertise in matters related to privacy and data protection. For example, I have given authorization that you can use my personal data for, let's say, SIM card. What if now there is an unauthorized use of my information? Maybe for opening a bank account. In that case, somebody should be there who should have an expertise, not in telecommunication industry, but in data privacy, in data protection and others. That is problem number 2 that we have to resolve. And then there is another issue. TDSAT is already overburdened with work. For example, between February 2020 till February 2025, there are close to 3,500 cases which are pending. And then the rules say that TDSAT has to resolve this complaint within 6 months. The existing complaints of 3,500 are pending. On top of that, once these rules are made, if more complaints come to TDSAT, how is TDSAT going to resolve these complaints within 6 months? Then what is the solution? The solution is increase the capacity. Allot more budget. Right now, there is only one bench of TDSAT. We need more benches. Even bigger problem is that currently TDSAT, it does not have a judicial member. And listen to me carefully. Supreme Court has said in multiple cases, I won't even sign the name, whether it is Joseph Matthew case, Madras Bar Association case, so many cases, that even in these tribunals, there should be control of the judiciary. That means judicial members should overshadow the experts. More judicial members than experts, because that is how independence of judiciary can be ensured. And the Supreme Court had said there should be a National Tribunals Commission, so that one national commission which can oversee all the different tribunals in this country. Even that NTC has not been created. And finally, the rules say that if you're not satisfied with the order given by the Digital Protection Board, you can file an appeal, and that too digitally. And when you have to file an appeal digitally, for that the website has to be responsive. For that you have to pay more to your developers and get a good website up and running, because your website has to be smooth. It has to navigate peacefully. For that you have to invest and get this website up and running in good order, so that public confidence is restored in the system. Because if you want the appeals to be filed digitally, then it must support it as well. That is what you need to understand from this article. Great. Now let's look at focus prelims. New Zealand Prime Minister was here, and something important has also happened related to 5 eyes. Can you tell me what are these 5 eyes? Established in 1946. Who are the members? United States, UK, New Zealand, Australia, and Canada. And this is considered to be the world's oldest intelligence sharing network. Sir, what are you saying? United States had not yet joined the Second World War, but it was assisting United Kingdom. United Kingdom broke Germany's Enigma code. Similarly, United States broke the Japan's purple code. You might have heard about them, these codes, basically encrypted systems. These systems were used to communicate, send and transmit messages during the war. So Germany was using Enigma code, Japan was using purple code, and these codes were used to communicate. And United Kingdom broke this German code, United States broke this German code, and then United States became part of the war, and then the Second World War got over. After the Second World War, both these two countries, they faced another problem. But this time not with their enemy, but their once ally. And who was their ally? Joseph Stalin of Russia, USSR. But before US and UK could act together, they realized that Soviet Union has already stolen information related to US and UK's nuclear plants and nuclear technology. So now what do? US and UK in 1946 established this intelligence sharing network. We will share intelligence with each other, and we will promise that we will not spy on each other. We will not spy on each other, but we will share intelligence. We will spy on the rest of the world. Then US and UK, they decided that we should bring other Commonwealth countries as well. Canada, Australia, and New Zealand as well. This is what we call Five Eyes. And if you look at whether it is the Vietnam War or the Gulf War in 1990s or the war on terror, because after 9/11, George Bush said, either you are with us or against us. You can't be neutral in this war. This is a war on terror. And that is where United States said that there is something called axis of evil. And we have to break this axis of evil, whether it is Iran, whether it is Iraq, whether it is North Korea and other countries. And that is how war on terror on Afghanistan was first launched. And then over a period of time, it went to Iraq as well, where Iraq was accused of manufacturing and storing weapons of mass destruction, which were later never found. But be that as it may, so it is this Five Eyes which has played a very important role in trade deal, in funding or aiding the Chinese dissidents. But now Donald Trump being Donald Trump, he referred to the Canadian Prime Minister, ex-Prime Minister Justin Trudeau as the governor of Canada, because Donald Trump wants Canada to be part of the United States. And maybe there are stories that United States may want Canada to come out of this Five Eyes. And because of the close deal or close coordination between US and Russia now, because Donald Trump calls everybody with their first name or the second name, but Putin, Mr. Putin, with a mark of respect. I don't know what he has on him. And this is where other countries, they have, according to various newspaper reports, decided not to share everything in the United States because you can't trust this guy. In fact, the intelligence chief, Tulsi Gabbard, who was here, she is alleged to be almost always quoting RT, which is the mouthpiece of Russian government. So from this article, what we need to understand is Five Eyes, because New Zealand, they have decided to strengthen security relationship with India. And in the same context, BJP pats Dr. Tharoor for lauding government stance on Ukraine conflict, because when the Ukraine conflict started, Dr. Shashi Tharoor criticized the central government for not taking a stance, because he wanted the government of India to be categorical in its support for Zelensky, in its support for Ukraine, because Russia is the aggressor. Now, Dr. Shashi Tharoor says, I have the egg, I have to wipe egg on my face. Because here we have a prime minister who can hug both Zelensky as well as Putin. So maybe the foreign policy, maybe the stance of the government of India during that Ukraine-Russia conflict, it has worked. Where was Dr. Shashi Tharoor speaking? He was speaking in the Raisina Dialogue. And what is this Raisina Dialogue? Started in 2016. These facts are very important. Started in 2016. It is an annual conference held every year by Observer Research Foundation. Observer Research Foundation is a think tank based in Delhi. By Observer Research Foundation with partnership with the Ministry of External Affairs. So these facts regarding Raisina Dialogue can be important. Every year, global leaders, businessmen, policymakers, they come together, discuss ideas in Delhi. That is Raisina Dialogue, started since 2016. There is a protest that for the first time, Sahitya Akademi Award, instituted in 1954, for the first time, there is no award, Sahitya Akademi Award, in the Bengali literature. Now, all kinds of conspiracy theories, we don't have to get into that, but we need to understand what is this Sahitya Akademi Award or Akademi Award. There shall be an award every year. Every year, there has to be Sahitya Akademi Award for a book written by Indian author. So the author has to be an Indian. And this has to be published in any of the languages recognized by Sahitya Akademi. So every year there has to be a Sahitya Akademi Award. It will be given to an Indian author who has published in which language? Any language which is recognized by the Sahitya Akademi. Now, which are these languages recognized by Sahitya Akademi? 22 Indian languages. Where are these 22 Indian languages mentioned? 8th schedule of the Constitution. Right or wrong? Right. But Sahitya Akademi also recognizes English, although it is not mentioned in the 8th schedule. It also recognizes Rajasthani, although Rajasthani is also not mentioned in the 8th schedule. So total Sahitya Akademi recognizes 24 languages. So every year, award will be given to an Indian author who writes in these 24 languages. But you should have written it when? 5 years prior to the year immediately preceding the award. Which means if you have to give award in 2025, remove 2024, from 2023, 5 years. That means 2019 to 2023. These 5 years will be considered. So this book must have been written by an Indian author in these 24 languages, recognized by the Sahitya Akademi, and will be considered for this award. Award may not be given in any language if the jury says that from this particular language, no such book was published which deserves this award. So it is not also necessary to give award in every language. You can skip as well, provided you say that the jury decided that in this period, in this 5-year period preceding the year of the award, no book published in that language deserved that award. Similarly, author must be of Indian nationality because he has to be an Indian, she has to be an Indian. Those who are persons of Indian origin and non-resident Indians, they are also not eligible for this award. Those having dual citizenship are also not eligible for award. This is just to reiterate, otherwise we don't recognize dual citizenship. If dual citizenship is mentioned, then you don't have to mention Indian nationality. But be that as it may, award is given once in a lifetime to an author. If you have written in Bengali, you can be given award only once. But later, if you write in Assamese or Bodo, you can be given Sahitya Akademi Award in that language. Similarly, this has to be an original work. If you are translating something it is not considered for the Sahitya Akademi Award. If you're writing a journal, it is not considered for the award. And if it is the work by the member of this Akademi board, otherwise there will be conflict of interest. I am part of the jury. I will recommend myself to this award. So even your book will not be considered. And one more important fact, if you are a recipient of the Bhasha Samman, you are also not eligible for this Sahitya Akademi. Posthumous awards, are they eligible or not? In a sense, somebody who has died, can you give the award posthumously after the death? Yes, provided you have died within this 5-year period. Which means if you are giving the award in 2025, somebody who has died before 2019 is not eligible for this award. You should have died after 2019, between 2019 to 2024. And if you write a book of 1 page, will it be called a book? No. According to UNESCO, the definition of the book is, the guideline is, book should have minimum 49 pages, excluding the cover pages. These facts are important, can be asked for your prelims examination. That is it for today. Thank you so much for staying with me. I will come up with the BEAR Act Lecture 3 very soon, as well as the PYQ session of the last 10 years on Saturday, this Saturday evening. Till then, have a great time. All the best. Bye-bye. Take care.